In this series, we will diving deep into the signs that it is time to change your location, not just physically, but spiritually and mentally, guided by the profound teachings of Stoic philosophy. Today, let's begin with a question that may hit close to home. Are you growing bitter, not better? You wake up tired not just in your body, but in your spirit. You walk into the same streets, the same rooms, around the same people, and every step feels heavier. You tell yourself you're hanging in there, but deep inside, resentment brews like a slow poison. You're growing bitter, not better. And when your dreams start feeling like distant echoes instead of daily motivators, there's a quiet war that happens inside the soul when it stays too long in the wrong place. This is the first and often the most subtle sign that it's time to move. But even they acknowledged something crucial: your environment can influence your internal state. Often, our misery is a signal, a message from the soul that something no longer fits. When you're constantly bitter, easily annoyed, or perpetually anxious, you're not weak. You're misaligned. Your roots are trying to grow in soil that no longer nourishes them. And if you're not alert, it will shape you more than you shape it. They're warnings. They are the soul's way of saying, this season is over. Let me grow. Epictetus encouraged us to ask, is this within my power? You may not control how the people around you act or how the city functions, but you do control whether or not you stay. Environment affects the soul. Ask, you criticize more. You start to envy those who dared to leave and start fresh. But here is the Stoic reality check. The bitterness you feel isn't just about others, it is about you staying in a place your soul has already left. The Stoics taught us to focus on what we can control: our mind, our character, our responses. Seneca once said, a man is as miserable as he thinks he is, but that thought doesn't emerge from nowhere. The Roman emperor often retreated to nature or different parts of the empire to realign with virtue and clarity. He didn't stay in noise and politics all day. He knew when the soul needed a shift. Bitterness doesn't show up overnight. It creeps in slowly when you're no longer inspired, when conversations feel hollow, when routines turn into ruts. You need the right environment to grow into your best self. If bitterness has taken root, don't numb it. Don't distract yourself with more noise or settle for less. Recognize it for what it is: a Stoic signal for inner transformation. You begin blaming others. Here's how bitterness looks through the lens of a Stoic. You feel drained instead of energized by your surroundings. You can't recall the last time you truly laughed or felt awe. You find yourself replaying the past hurts more than imagining future hopes. You use sarcasm and complaints as a daily coping mechanism. You avoid silence because it reminds you of what's missing. These are not weaknesses. The power of honest self-awareness. The Stoics believed in brutal honesty with oneself. When your growth turns into bitterness, your first Stoic duty is not to endure, it's to reflect. Am I becoming the person I want to be in this place? Is staying here helping me live according to reason and virtue? Or am I slowly giving up who I am just to fit in? Movement is not failure. It's renewal. Some believe that moving on is running away, but in Stoicism, movement with intention is not escape, it is evolution. Even Marcus Aurelius, just like a plant needs the right light to bloom, your values are constantly under siege. There comes a time when the space around you no longer reflects the principles within you. You wake up ready to be honest. You're not being tested anymore, you're being targeted, kind, disciplined, and yet your environment rewards dishonesty, cruelty, shortcuts, and chaos. You try to stay noble. You try to be strong. Stoicism isn't about enduring forever in hostile environments. It's about discernment, knowing when to hold the line and when to leave the battlefield entirely. But every day feels like a battlefield, and slowly you begin to compromise. Stoicism teaches that virtue is the highest good, and when a place erodes that, Imagine trying to be calm in a culture that glorifies outrage, trying to live simply in a city obsessed with status, trying to be honest in an office that rewards manipulation. That kind of resistance every single day isn't heroic, it's draining. Epictetus wrote, "But even a citadel can fall if surrounded long enough by siege warfare, if every conversation, every interaction, every expectation around you forces you to choose between acceptance and integrity. You are not in a training ground anymore. You're in enemy territory. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. But what if you're not just thought foolish? What if you're punished for your values?" This applies to the environment too. A wise Stoic doesn't despise the city, the town, or water down your truth just to get by. You are not enduring with strength. You are bleeding in silence. The culture, but they don't deny that it might not be the right place to grow. What if your inner compass is spinning because the entire world around you is magnetic with corruption? Then the problem isn't your strength. The problem is your location. Here's how value erosion begins. Everyone else does it, so maybe I'm the weird one. It asks you to live in alignment with nature, your inner nature. If the outer world is constantly violating that, the Stoic response is not passive endurance. It's a powerful movement. You laugh at jokes that make you uncomfortable just to fit in. You let things slide that used to matter because it's not worth the fight. You start thinking, but they feared the death of character. The soul is also stained by its surroundings if we are not vigilant. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." But add, you start lying to yourself, saying it's not that bad, and slowly, your virtue starts dying in small pieces. The Stoics didn't fear death. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius speaks of the inner citadel, a fortress within you where virtue lives untouchable. You don't have to hate the place. You don't have to be angry at the people. But you do have to be honest about the cost of staying, the wisdom to walk away. Stoicism isn't about stubborn pride. It's about aligned action. Justify your peace. Seneca said, "A wise man is content with himself, but not so as to despise others or to deny help." Sometimes, staying becomes an act of self-betrayal. If every day you are forced to explain your morality, ask yourself, are my best values supported or silenced here? Do I leave conversations feeling uplifted or empty? Am I becoming more of who I am or less? Stoicism doesn't demand you stay and suffer. Would the best version of me thrive here or suffocate? If your answer leans toward suffocation, your soul is speaking. The noise drowns out your inner voice. Have you ever found yourself in a place so loud, so chaotic, so overstimulating that you can't even hear yourself think? You sit down to reflect, but the traffic screams. You try to meditate, but your phone won't stop buzzing. The environment is simply too loud for your wisdom to speak. You try to write or create or simply breathe, but your mind is hijacked by everything going on around you. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor surrounded by war, politics, and betrayal, still found time to sit with his thoughts and write his meditations. Because your surroundings never shut up. In his own words, you are not broken. The Stoics believed in the power of silence and inner reflection. Nowhere can a man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. But what if that retreat is constantly interrupted by the world? What if your mind is no longer your own sanctuary? You don't just need peace, you need space for inner stillness to do its work. Noise isn't just sound, it's a distraction. It's the constant pull of irrelevant opinions, fake urgency, gossip, news, expectations, chaos. It has the ping of a notification the moment you sit down to think about your life. And here's the real danger. The more you live in noise, the more disconnected you become from your own voice. You stop hearing your intuition. You stop noticing your needs. You stop listening to your conscience because the volume of the world is always higher than your soulless whisper. Signs you're being drowned by noise, but they understood its danger. But often, it's because your mind is never allowed to rest in silence. Cities that never sleep, toxic workplaces, chaotic households, attention hijacking apps, all these create a storm that kills reflection. Then Stoicism doesn't ask you to endure, it asks you to remove the obstacle. And sometimes the obstacle is the place. Seneca wrote, "The mind must be given relaxation, it will rise, improve and sharper after good rest, not in committee meetings, not in war councils, in solitude. But how can it rest when the world won't let it?" Then the most stoic move you can make is to change your position physically, mentally, geographically. Go where your inner voice becomes the loudest sound you hear, spending more time in nature, or even relocating entirely. But one thing is certain, you can't become who you were meant to be. If you can't even hear your own thoughts. Here's what it looks like when the external world overwhelms your inner one. You feel anxious even when nothing is technically wrong. You can't sit in silence without reaching for your phone. Your thoughts feel scattered and never complete. You can't remember the last time you felt deeply present. You feel overwhelmed, but don't know why. The Stoics didn't fear the noise. Environment shapes mental clarity. You may think your exhaustion is from working too hard or not sleeping enough. And Stoicism requires reflection. It requires space to question your thoughts, inspect your beliefs, and recalibrate your direction. If the environment blocks your ability to reflect, Marcus Aurelius found clarity not in action, but in stillness. He journaled to himself daily, not in public speeches. If the noise outside is making it impossible for you to think clearly, go where silence lives. That might mean moving to a quieter part of town. Ask yourself, when was the last time I had a moment of deep, uninterrupted stillness? Is my clarity being compromised by constant noise? Do I still recognize the sound of my own inner wisdom? Can I live stoically in this environment, or is it forcing me to survive without thinking? If you find yourself craving silence, that's not a weakness. That's your soul demanding room to breathe. You're living more in regret than in purpose. Regret is like a shadow that grows longer when we stay in the same place too long. It stretches behind us, reminding us of everything we didn't do, couldn't say, or failed to change. It's time to ask the hard Stoic question. When your thoughts are stuck in rewind, they taught us that every moment is a fresh opportunity to live with virtue. Realize this, and you will find strength. Then it's not just the past that's the problem, it's the place. To make decisions aligned with nature and reason. As Marcus Aurelius said, and your heart is tangled in the past, you're no longer living, you're haunted. And when that haunting outweighs your daily sense of purpose, is this place keeping me alive or just keeping me from becoming alive again? The Stoics didn't believe in wallowing. You have power over your mind, not outside events. But here's the problem. If your environment keeps dragging you back into who you used to be, sometimes where you are is a living reminder of your pain, your mistakes, or your unfulfilled potential. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to imagine anything different. Ever catch yourself thinking things like, I should have left years ago. If I had taken that opportunity, I wouldn't be stuck here. I had dreams, but this place killed them. Every day feels the same, and I feel like I'm disappearing. Honor your past is to leave the place where it happened and finally build the future that your soul has been whispering about all along. That's not nostalgia, that's spiritual suffocation. Stoicism doesn't tell you to deny regret, it tells you to transform it. The Stoics didn't preach passive endurance. They preached disciplined action guided by reason. Regret is not a weakness, but how you react to it that matters. It's a signal, a fire alarm for the soul. And when that alarm keeps going off, day after day, you don't just sit there and meditate through the smoke. You get out, you move, you act. If the city only reminds you of missed chances, if your home feels like a graveyard of old dreams, then it is time to rewrite the story in a new setting. From regret to responsibility, Epictetus taught, It's not what happens to you. If you've made mistakes, let them be your teachers, not your jailers. But if your environment keeps reinforcing your failures instead of your future, if people around you only remember your worst chapter, you don't heal in the same place you broke. You don't find new purpose in the shadows of old pain. Sometimes, the only way to stoic rebirth through movement. There is nothing unstoic about changing direction. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. If regret is stealing your days, that's not fate, it's habit. And habits can be broken with one bold decision. Move. Not to escape, but to evolve. Let a new place become your proving ground. Let a new chapter become your redemption arc." Questions to ask yourself with stoic honesty. Do I feel like I'm building something meaningful here, or just reliving memories? Is this place helping me forgive myself or forcing me to relive old guilt? Am I surrounded by reminders of who I was or encouragement for who I can become? If I had no fear, where would I go next? If you're living in more what-ifs than I wills, that's your call to courage. Your circle feels like a cage. There's nothing lonelier than feeling trapped around people who are supposed to love you. You laugh less. You dream smaller. You shrink yourself to avoid judgment. It is not about who is around you, it is about who calls your better self forward. You keep your wins quiet to avoid envy. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve. The process is mutual, sometimes, and your loss is loud to earn sympathy. If that sounds familiar, then listen closely. You're not surrounded, you're imprisoned, and Stoic wisdom has something to say about that. The Stoics taught that true friendship is based on virtue, not proximity, or your right to grow. They are no longer your circle, they are your limits. Seneca wrote, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." If your circle isn't mutual, it's a trap. You may have shared history with those friends, you may have been loyal to that group for years, but if staying means shrinking, then moving is not betrayal, it's self-respect. A toxic circle doesn't need to be loud or abusive. It's about living with purpose, freedom, and clarity. No matter how much sunlight and water you give it, it will never reach its full height because the roots have no room. Friends who laugh when you share your vision, family who constantly remind you to be realistic, co-workers who thrive on gossip and resentment, neighborhoods where dreams feel illegal. If the people closest to you make you question your worth, your vision. Imagine planting a tree in a tiny pot. You can honor where you came from while refusing to stay stuck in it. The same goes for you. But he also knew when solitude was wiser than noisy company. You may have grown up in that town. Stoicism isn't about forced loyalty. You leave because you love the person you're still becoming. Epictetus warned us. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control, and sometimes that means disregarding what others think, say, or expect, especially when they're keeping you small. Signs that your circle has become a cage. You feel anxious when sharing new goals. You're more liked when you play small, but you also don't stay in the cage. You rise with dignity and move forward with calm, quiet resolve. You censor yourself to keep the peace. Your progress causes tension, not celebration. You feel emotionally drained after every interaction. These are not minor red flags. These are signs of slow spiritual death. If your environment doesn't allow you to evolve into who you're becoming, it is sabotaging your Stoic mission. Stoicism doesn't say burn bridges or hate others. Quite the opposite. It teaches acceptance without attachment. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on how to stay composed amidst people who lacked virtue. Sometimes the greatest act of love for yourself and others is space. You don't leave because you hate them. Stoic questions to reflect on. Do I feel more free or smaller when I'm with these people? Is this circle watering my growth or resenting it? Am I becoming more of who I'm meant to be or just more tolerated? If I had no fear of judgment, who would I surround myself with? Stoicism is about responsibility. You don't blame the circle. You're surviving, not thriving. There's a quiet kind of suffering that goes unnoticed. It's not the pain that makes you scream, it's the dull, daily ache of existence without elevation. You check the boxes, you smile when required, but deep down, you know you've stopped living fully. You go through the motions. You're no longer inspired. You're simply enduring. This isn't laziness. It isn't a weakness. It's a signal. And Stoicism teaches us to respect our signals. They didn't tell you to just push through a joyless life in the name of false strength. Life is to be lived with excellence. The Stoics didn't romanticize suffering. They taught us that life's purpose is to live with virtue, clarity, and fulfillment, not to merely exist in a haze of repetition. Seneca said, "Life is long if you know how to use it, but when your environment turns every day into just another bore of survival, you're not using life, life is using you." What surviving looks like disguised as normalcy. You wake up dreading the day, not because it's hard, but because it's empty. You no longer expect joy. Just hope the day passes quickly. You don't feel alive, just functional. You get by on caffeine, distraction, and shallow conversation. You can't remember the last time you felt proud, passionate, or playful. This is survival. And the longer it lasts, the more it convinces you it's all there is. But the Stoic knows better. There is always a higher mode of living, one that demands we align our surroundings with our soulless needs. Endurance is not the goal, it's a tool. There's a Stoic misunderstanding in modern culture that glorifies suffering. Yes, the Stoics endured much exile, war, injustice, illness, but they endured with a purpose, to protect their virtue, their clarity, their freedom. If your daily survival is not tied to purpose, then it's not Stoic endurance. It's a slow surrender. And Stoicism calls us out of that into motion, into deliberate, courageous change. The difference between survival and thriving. Surviving feels like emotional numbness, avoidance of growth, resistance to change, constant low-level fatigue, living just to make it to the weekend. Thriving feels like alignment with purpose, excitement to grow, challenges embraced as opportunities, emotional clarity, living each day with presence and depth. And thriving often requires a new setting, a new community, or a new challenge. The environment you're in might be too small, too stale, too misaligned, not because you're failing, but because you're outgrowing it. Ask yourself with Stoic honesty, and to live as if we are accountable to something higher. Do I wake up with direction, or just obligation? Am I challenged here in ways that build me or break me? Is my growth being supported or stifled? If I stayed here for the next 5 years, would I become stronger or smaller? If the answers trouble you, listen to that. Epictetus taught us to examine our life daily. If your environment prevents that, it's not noble to stay. It's wasteful. There is no virtue in pretending you're okay when you're not. There is no wisdom in shrinking just to survive a space that cannot contain your potential. If you are surviving but not thriving, it's time for change. Change is not betrayal. If your environment can no longer host your evolution, then be brave enough to seek one that can. Change is honoring the next version of you. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You were born for this, to live in accordance with nature, to rise, to reason, to reflect. You were not born to clock and zone out and fade away. You were born to live on purpose, with purpose, and in purpose." Surviving may keep your body here, but only thriving keeps your soul alive. Subscribe to Modern Life Stoic for the next empowering chapter. See you in the next one.